We'd like to thank Montecito Bank Trust for their generous support in making Scam Squad possible.
Sound off.
1, 2.
Sound off.
3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Scam Squad.
I'm Patty Teal here with my co-host Greg Hans, who's filling in for Inspector Christina Perkins. And we have Montecito Bank Trust here with us today, specifically Shawn Dyer. They're our partners in fighting scams and fraud in Santa Barbara. And we're so happy that you're here, Shawn.
Thank you for having me.
So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, I have a couple topics, and the first one I'm going to start with is spoofing. And spoofing is when you get a phone call and it says one thing, but it really is another. And in this case, it's where someone is spoofing the name and number of Montecito Bank Trust. So you get a call and your screen says Montecito Bank Trust, and you answer it because it's your bank. And then the fraudster starts you down a path of trying to glean personal information from you. So we've seen this happen in the last couple months to quite a few customers. And the suggestion is, hang up, call back the number on the back of your debit card or the known bank phone number, because there isn't a way that we are able to stop the spoofing from happening. And the only sure way is for you to call into the bank, not having the bank call you if they're asking for personal information. We do make outbound calls every day, but just a wise practice to call back if you're unsure, and especially since we're seeing that happen right now.
Since so many people do that, spoof numbers, it must not be terribly difficult to do, but I have no idea of the technology involved in spoofing. Do you?
So
I don't know.
It's basically just a computer program that they run through their phone. You can download an app that allows you to change your outbound number, or they could be calling from a boiler room call center, and they've got that outbound line set up to come up as whatever's been programmed into the computer. It's pretty easy with the new technology of VoIP, voice over internet protocol.
Mm-hmm.
This makes it especially easy, but like I said, I think there's even apps you can download to spoof your number, because that's how we get a lot of those swatting calls that you'll hear about in the.
Oh, right.
They'll call into 911 from what appears to be a local number and say that somebody's being held hostage and they need to hurry up or they're going to start killing everybody. And yeah. So Shawn, I know this is an obvious answer to you, but just to remind our listeners, will a banking institution, any financial institution, the IRS, your credit card company, will they ever call you on the phone and ask you for personal information?
Not directly, no. And like for us, for Montecito Bank Trust and other banks as well, there's different protocols in identifying customers when there's outbound calls, security questions or certain things that you've set up ahead of time when you opened your account that we are able to identify you that aren't necessarily what we indicate as personal identifiable information. Yeah.
So that's always,
no, we would never call and say, what's your account number?
Yeah, or your social security number or your date of birth. Those are not things that a financial institution or any legitimate business is going to do via phone. That's information you're going to give them in person when you set up the account.
Correct.
And I guess other than calling back, there's just no way to tell that it's not the real number.
The questions that they're asking should be an immediate red flag. You probably don't have a banking transaction going on, or they may have intercepted an email and know that you are in the middle of a real estate transaction or something like that. But like Shawn said, very seldom is the bank going to call regarding a transaction like that. And if they do, they're never going to ask you for your PII. They're going to have other questions they want answered, like, did you authorize this wire? Can you come in and can we talk about this before we send this wire?
Yeah, we'll always encourage that. There's, any sort of suspicion, we'll just encourage the customer to come in, visit their local branch. Our bank is a small local community bank. We only bank people that live within our footprint. So you should be able to get to a branch. And if there's any concern, that's what we would suggest that a customer does. Go in so we can see you face to face.
No, thank you, Shawn.
About check fraud, which just is hot on the radar. It just, I don't know, the last 6, 7, 8 months, it's just had an uptick. And fraudsters are getting more creative. For the most common, there were 2 types with check fraud. The check is stolen out of the mail. You've written a check, you put it in the mail, and it's been stolen somewhere along the line, and the payee name is washed, and it's made payable to someone else. We call that payee name altered. When that happens, and then the customer finally sees it on their statement or becomes aware of it, banks have a process of we're able to send that item on collection to the bank that processed the check, that received the check. That's called the bank of first deposit. We have 3 years that we can send a check on collection when the payee name has been altered. The other big check that is most common in check fraud is a counterfeit check. It is a fake check. It has all your information, but it's not from your check stock. It has been created on a separate check stock that may look very, very similar, and that's what's happening now. We have been seeing these counterfeit checks that are so similar to the customer's actual bank stock that we really have to review them carefully to see if it's a counterfeit or not. And it's important because counterfeit checks cannot be sent on collection. Banks only have 24 hours to return a counterfeit check, period. So it's really important to monitor your account. Go online. Everyone should have online banking by now. Doesn't mean you have to do transactions online. You don't have to do bill pay, although I would strongly recommend that instead of writing out checks. But every online banking system allows you to view the image, because if you're balancing a statement, like in the olden days, a paper statement, you're looking at the check number and the dollar amount, and that was it. We didn't care. I mean, that meant the check cleared. Everything's good. Not so good anymore. You need to view the image of the check that has cleared your account. Not just the front of it, but also the back, because the payee name could be altered. The endorsement could be forged or not endorsed as drawn, which we also see fairly often, where it's payable to ABC Company and it's endorsed by Joe Smith. That's not who the payee is. We have to send that type of item on collection. And to cut down the process of having to do collection items, if you're viewing your checks, you're going in online banking every day, every other day, and you're viewing your paid items, and if something's up, you can contact the bank and we can handle the return process much quicker than having to go through the collection piece of it, because that takes months and months for a collection item to be processed by the bank of first deposit and to get payment or to get denied. And that's something with this new rash where we've sent checks out on collection because they are altered, and the banks of first deposit are slowing the process down and returning them, saying, nope, that's not an altered check, that's a counterfeit check. So it's like playing tag. So the whole point is be on top of your account, be watching your checks, view the images front and back, and be in touch with your bank if there's anything suspicious so we can help you get that item returned quickly.
Shawn, you may not know the answer to this, but any idea why you have 3 years on an altered check, but only 1 day on a counterfeit check?
I do not know why, but I know that it has been that way. I have been in banking for 35 years. Them are the rules, so I do not know.
Do you know if there is any movement afoot with either the FDIC or the banking regulatory people to change that, give say maybe a 90-day window for counterfeit checks?
I mean, we're not the only bank that's experiencing this, obviously. I mean, the fraudsters are just always a step ahead. So I'm sure there are discussions about it out there, but I could not tell you if anything's concrete or coming down the pipeline.
That's really hard for people that get a counterfeit check deposited, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. And then, you know, if we're outside that 24-hour window, but the customer notified the bank in time, like within their 30 days of having their statement, and they're, you know, keep their checkbook safe, and they're, you know, conscientious about all that, the bank's going to take a loss because our customer notified us. But
Right.
it's just, it's, you know, better for everyone if we're all, with this age of technology, everybody has the ability to go in and look at their account real quick and pull up images quickly and easily. I mean, I do it on my phone. You don't have to be on your computer. You can have whatever bank you bank with. They all have a mobile app, so you can view your items on your phone. And yeah, we just haven't found any other way other than, you know, constantly educating the customers that this is out there. Don't put a check in the mail in the blue bins outside a post office, because they'll get pulled right out. Use bill pay rather than writing checks at all. You know, those are just ways to help, but I don't see it going away. Check fraud's still.
And there may be elderly, very elderly people who don't know how to do that technology, but it can be shown to them. And that's probably a good thing to do if you have an elderly relative, to show them how they can check those images.
Shawn, one thing that we talked about this last week a little bit, because like I said, we have one of your cases at our office, and I talked about what I've started doing, because I'm now super paranoid about this. When I send checks out, if I have to write a paper check, I'll purposely not put it in the envelope, the window envelope that's an obvious bill payment or shows check. So my suggestion to our listeners last week was to, you know, just use a regular, you know, number 10 business envelope and address it yourself, and at least maybe disguise it a little bit so that the people with sticky fingers don't realize it's a check. We also talked about online bill paying. Any other things you would suggest to your clients or our listeners about other ways to safeguard checks in transit? Any other things you've been suggested?
Well, the only other thing is, if you are writing checks, or even with bill pay, if it's to someone who's not, you know, when I say bill pay, if you're paying utilities like gas, electric, phone, whatever, those usually end up being converted and not actually going out as a paper check. They are converted with a file. So all the customers that decide to do their bill pay and send their payment to Southern California Edison today, they're all going to be batched together in one, what we call an ACH file, automatic clearinghouse. So it's electronic. There's no paper. So then when you look on your account, it might say ACH number, whatever, but it's been converted. There's no paper going through. But for those bill pay that are an actual check, what I do is, once it's kicked off, or I've written one and it goes out in the mail, maybe I do that once a year, I will, if I don't see it clearing within 5 days, I follow up with the payee. Did you receive it? Have you just not processed it yet? So again, just keeping tabs on your checks that you're writing. If you're sending them in the mail locally, the whoever you sent them to should receive them within 2 days. So, and then most people, if they get a check, they're depositing it or, you know, negotiating it right away because it's a check. So you just follow up on them and make sure they did receive them, because that is the biggest thing with the payee name altered checks. You know, oftentimes it's businesses and the checks are going to vendors that they pay once a month, and it's usually 60, 90 days later that the customer notifies the bank, because it takes the vendor they've made the checks payable to that long to come back and say, hey, we didn't receive payment from November or December. What's going on? And that's when the customer goes back and says, well, the check cleared. Then they pull up the image. Oops, that's not who got the check. So yeah, like you say, you're doing the envelope, the non-window envelope, but following up again, looking on if you've written checks to see that they're clearing timely, and viewing the image. If they haven't, call the payee.
Yeah, what it comes down to is, unfortunately, this really has to fall back on the consumer and the public. The banks, you and your people in the fraud department, and all the banks have fraud departments, and all the credit card companies, and we've all got law enforcement, trying to look out for everybody. But the reality is there's only so much, you guys can do, we can do. So it's really incumbent upon our listeners to be diligent about not allowing themselves to become a victim. Do what it takes to not become a victim, so that you don't need the assistance of the fraud department or law enforcement. We are there to help, Shawn and I, and everybody's there to help, but sometimes our hands are tied, especially like you said, when you've got a 1-day window to get that sent back to the bank of origination.
Right.
We're absolutely right. It's not like we're not trying to help you. And, all banks have fraud software that helps to try to identify items that are out of sequence or unusual or suspicious, that we're monitoring every single day. Some of them are okay. Some of them are fraud, and we do catch them within the 24 hours. But yeah, we can't catch everything. We just can't do that. And a lot more responsibility is on the customer to protect and review their assets and make sure that they're on top of it.
Shawn, is a teller more likely to identify an altered check than if you put it through as an electronic deposit by taking a picture, or is it so hard anymore because they're very good at it?
It's so hard, but also I will say, over the course of my banking career, the going into a branch to negotiate a fraudulent check, whether it's altered or counterfeit, is not nearly as common since mobile deposit came into play, because now you take that fraudulent check, no one at a bank is seeing or feeling that check. I mean, it could be pretty suspicious. You're taking a picture of it with your phone, and it's going to an account. No one's ever seeing it. So if that check gets flagged because it's unusual as a mobile deposit, but that's more the route that fraudsters take, or depositing them at an ATM. They'll disguise themselves so the film won't show, or you won't have any good photos of them making a deposit at an ATM. But for us, it would be much more common for a fraudster to just mobile deposit checks
That
than
makes
an
sense.
ATM or going in and cashing. Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. You've given us some really great tips today, and be careful and do what you need to do to keep track of your own checks. We look forward to talking to you again next month. Montecito Bank and Trust comes on every month and gives us the latest warnings. They really know what's going on out there because that's what they're doing every day. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Patty. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks for
Thanks.
coming on.